Mia, you're acting so absurdly. My mom waved the act in my face during what should have been a joyful housewarming party, saying, Eric needs this more than you do. He has a family to support. What do you have? Just yourself. The words were like a kick to the face. And I stood there in the kitchen of the house I had saved all my life for, gasping for air as my entire world fell apart. Having worked double shifts, picked up extra hours in the intensive care unit, and saved every penny I could for the past 10 years as a nurse at Memorial Hospital, I'm Mia Reynolds. Never thought at 33 that I would be betrayed by my own family in this way. When my parents faced foreclosure on their old home, I stepped in with my $175 life savings to help them purchase a new home. The arrangement was quite clear, since I paid the down payment. The house would be in my name. But unfortunately, agreements don't matter much to my family. My mom's golden child from her second marriage, my stepbrother Eric, was there grinning smugly as usual. My stepdad George stated, "We've already filed the paperwork," without even glancing at me. He had never made a single contribution to our parents' well-being, always too busy trying to figure himself out while bouncing from one failed business venture to another. However, at 38, he suddenly had a wife and a baby on the way, which apparently made him more deserving of my investment. You're helping your brother build a family, so you should be delighted that the house is now in Eric's name. His casual dismissal of my sacrifice infuriated me. I had fallen in love with this lovely colonial-style house, which I had envisioned as a gathering place for family holidays and celebrations. And now I was seeing it being given to someone who hadn't earned it. I could see the awkward looks and whispered conversations of the extended family and friends who had come to celebrate. My best friend Rachel, who had witnessed my extreme efforts to save that money, gripped her glass tightly to the point of breaking. "This isn't right," I managed to say, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. My Aunt Sarah, who had always been more of a mother to me than my own mother, stood in the corner shaking her head in disbelief. I had nothing except that money. We had a deal. "Oh, quit being so theatrical," my mother said, rolling her eyes. "Eric needs a stable home for his baby. So you'll save it up again because you're a nurse. It's not like you've got anybody to support." At that moment, I lost it. Years of being the responsible one, the trustworthy one, and the one who always put others before herself came tumbling down. They had no clue what I was capable of when pushed too far. And I understood as I grew up that I was different from Eric in my parents' eyes by the way I looked at their entitled faces. In less than a year after my dad died when I was 6, my mom remarried George, and Eric instantly became the center of their universe. While I studied and worked part-time at the neighborhood pharmacy to save money for college, Eric was showered with new cars, fancy clothes, and endless second chances. My parents would spend their savings to support Eric whenever his business endeavors failed. Whether it was the car wash, the supplement company, or the cryptocurrency investment opportunity, I put myself through nursing school, worked nights as a certified nursing assistant, and took out student loans that I'm still paying off. I watched them refinance their home 3 times to cover his mistakes, remaining silent even as I watched their retirement slip away. I had been saving for my own place, dreaming of a small cottage with a garden where I could finally establish roots. Therefore, I didn't hesitate when they called me 6 months ago, crying and desperate about their impending house loss. Instead, I offered them my savings, hoping that somehow it would show them how valuable I was. I fell in love with the Colonial on Maple Street after we spent weeks looking at properties together. And the realtor worked with us to make it happen. I signed all the basic papers as the owner. And my mom used to say, "You're such a blessing, honey," while giving me a strong embrace. "We'll work this out as a family." I wanted to believe her so much that I disregarded the warning flags, including the hushed phone conversations with Eric, the meetings with their lawyer that I was not privy to, and the way they postponed the last papers. Over coffee one morning, Rachel had tried to warn me, "Mia, get everything in writing. I don't trust them to do right by you." What kind of parents would steal from their own daughter? I defended them, though, because I was sure that even if they favored Eric, they wouldn't steal from me. The day before the housewarming party, I had spent hours at Target choosing new decorations for what I believed to be my investment property, including bright throw pillows for the living room, fluffy towels for the bathrooms, and a welcome mat that said, "Home Sweet Home." Now, as I stood in that kitchen, watching Eric parade around as if he had earned any of this, I thought about all the nights I'd worked in the intensive care unit, the holidays I'd missed, the relationships I'd put on hold, and the vacations I'd never taken. All of those things felt like cruel jokes scattered around a house that had been stolen from me. They hadn't just stolen my savings, they'd stolen years of my life. Rachel slid into the seat next to me as I sat at the kitchen counter, gazing at my phone. My mind was spinning as the party went on around me, and guests were beginning to depart, avoiding eye contact and awkwardly congratulating Eric. "Something's wrong with the way they transferred the deed. They couldn't have done this legally without your signature. You need to call Marcus," she whispered, referring to her brother, a real estate lawyer. Eric and his wife, Jessica, were just passing by, loudly discussing their renovation plans. My stomach wrenched as he said, "We'll probably gut the kitchen first." Stroking the granite countertop I had assisted in choosing. "Maybe knock down a wall or two. Really. Make it our own." The folder of documents my parents had shown me when we first came to an agreement was still on top of the refrigerator where Mom always kept important documents. So I looked around the kitchen, and while everyone was preoccupied with Eric's ambitious plans, I stealthily picked it up and slipped it into my bag. "I need some air," I said to Rachel as I made my way to the back porch. With shaking hands, I extracted the papers from the door and saw the original contract I had signed, which made it quite plain that I would receive the house in exchange for the down payment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. And then I saw something else, a letter from their lawyer, dated only 2 weeks ago, alerting them that transferring the deed without my agreement may be deemed fraud. It was then that I realized what I had to do. This was no longer simply about the money. "Stop pouting outside. Come in, and be happy for your brother." I needed legal help after years of neglect, so I tremblingly asked Marcus, "Are you free tomorrow?" He responded promptly, "Come to my office at 9 a.m. Rachel informed me of what transpired. "Bring everything you have." I went back inside and saw my mom and George gathered with Eric in the living room, likely discussing additional plans for my house. Looking up as I walked in, their looks a mixture of disdain and displeasure. My mother raised an eyebrow when I finally decided to stop being theatrical, and I managed to grin just enough to surprise them. "Actually, I want to thank you," I murmured gently. "You've given me a clear perspective." They exchanged bewildered glances, obviously anticipating more tears or begging. But I was done pleading. Done being the dependable daughter who always delivered without demanding anything in return. I glanced around one final time, but Eric laughed and said, "See, she's fine, she'll get over it," as I picked up my bag to head out. "No, Eric, I won't get over it. But you'll wish I had." With a coffee cup in hand to calm me, I waited in Marcus's office the following morning as he went over the papers arranged on his desk, shaking his head and taking notes here and there. When he finally glanced up at me after what seemed like hours, he smiled slightly and said, "Mia, they really messed up here," while displaying the lawyer's warning letter. "The deed transfer isn't just questionable, it's fraudulent. They can't legally give away a house that was meant to be yours." "But they already did," I said, my voice quivering. "Because you laid down the money, signed the first documents, and the agreement is clearly documented. I have a friend in the DA's office who would be extremely interested in this case," Marcus stated, reaching for his phone. "And a fraudulent transfer can be reversed. The deed is in Eric's name." When he said, what they did could actually result in criminal charges, my heart raced. Criminal charges? "I don't want my parents to go to jail," was what made me pause, even after everything. Marcus sternly added, "Listen to me. They stole $175 from you, which is a major theft. They are taking advantage of your weakness to fight back. And based on these bank statements, it appears that they may have faked your signature on several papers." He was correct. They had relied on me my entire life to be the understanding one, the one who would make sacrifices without complaining. I took a deep breath as Marcus said, "What do you want to do?" while my phone continued to ring with texts from my mom, which alternated between guilt trips and demands that I stop being immature. Marcus nodded and began typing on his computer. "I want my house back. I want them to realize that they can no longer treat me this way. By tomorrow, we will serve them with documents as part of our legal action to nullify the transfer. I'm filing an emergency injunction to stop them from altering the property." For the first time since the housewarming celebration, I was not sobbing or trembling but rather had a peculiar sense of peace as I walked out of his office. Halfway through my drive to work for my evening shift in the intensive care unit, my phone popped with notifications. My mom had phoned 12 times. Eric 7 times. Eric sent me numerous texts that were both angry and frantic, however. The final one brought a smile to my face. "What in the world did you do?" I put my phone away and concentrated on my patients. They would discover tomorrow just what happens when you push the lovely daughter too far. So let them fear for a little and suffer a small portion of the anxiety they'd given me. When I was getting ready for my shift the next morning, Rachel called to inform me that my mom and Eric were causing a commotion outside my apartment. They were really there when I glanced out my window, with Eric pacing back and forth and my mom hammering on the front door of the building. When I eventually got downstairs, my mom said, "You have to stop this. This will tear our family apart." "That's rich," I said, managing to remain unusually composed. Eric came forward, his face flushed with rage. "You're being ridiculous. You didn't care about tearing the family apart when you stole my life savings." The color drained from their faces. "I have a baby on the way. What were you going to do with that house anyway? Live there alone with your cats?" "Actually," I said, taking out my phone, "I have the proof of our original agreement right here. Want to see the letter from your lawyer warning you that this was illegal? Or should we talk about the documents where someone forged my signature?" My mother took hold of my arm and said, "Honey, we can resolve this as a family. Lawyers are not necessary. The moment you decided my life savings meant nothing to you, we stopped being a family." I carefully took her hand away. "Copies of everything are now at the DA's office." She gasped, tears in her eyes, the same tears that had worked on me so many times before. And I advised her to speak with her lawyer about reversing the deed transfer unless she wanted this to grow worse. "No, Mom, you could end up in jail. I'm just defending myself." Eric opened his mouth to speak when his phone rang. The voice on the speaker was that of his wife, Jessica, who told him in a panic that the police were at their house, their real house, asking questions regarding the transfer of the deed. And they hurried out, rushing to cope with the impending catastrophe. Rachel rushed over and gave me a hug, saying, "I've never seen you stand up to them like that, and I've never had proof of their manipulation before." Rachel had been monitoring me from her car to ensure my safety. "Even though it's always just my word against theirs, I have everything in paper this time." Later that day, Marcus called to inform me that Eric and my parents' attorney had contacted them and wanted to make a settlement. Marcus said, "Should we accept the deal?" The prospect of criminal charges had finally convinced them that I wasn't going to back down. And they would not only return the house to me but also cover my legal bills and other damages. I answered firmly, yes. But I also wanted them to sign a statement acknowledging precisely what they did. They can't act like this never occurred. The papers were being transferred back to me, along with a settlement that included my legal fees and an additional $50 in damages. But more significantly, my parents and Eric were signing a notarized statement admitting that they had attempted to defraud me. And I sat in Marcus's office 2 weeks later as they signed them. My mom was weeping uncontrollably and using a tissue to dab at her tears while George gazed at the floor. Eric appeared to have aged 10 years. His arrogant smile replaced by a clenched jaw. His wife, Jessica, had left him after learning that he had been concealing their own financial difficulties. The notary pointed to the last page and said, "I need all parties to sign here." They did so one by one, indicating that the home theft was only the beginning. Eric got up and mumbled, "I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything." My hand didn't quiver at all when it was my time. "You wrecked everything when you chose to take from me. But I merely put things right," I said gently. I ignored them as they left the office. My mom trying again to get my attention. The days of manipulation and guilt trips had come to an end. Congratulations. The house is legally yours. But I had one more surprise for them. Marcus smiled and gave me the new deed. As I pulled out another set of papers, I said, "Actually, I'd like to sell it." My family had already told others about their miscommunication with the house, hoping to keep their good name with friends and family. And they were unaware that I had received an offer from a developer who wanted to convert the property into apartments. Later, while we celebrated at our favorite coffee shop, Rachel said, "They'll be furious when they find out. They assumed you'd let them stay there. And the offer was much above market value." The next day, I signed the paperwork to sell the house. "That's exactly why I'm selling," I said, adding that they must realize they no longer have any control over me. The developer was overjoyed. My real estate agent was overjoyed. And I was at last free. With the settlement money and the sale proceeds, I could purchase my ideal cottage with a garden and still have money left over. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother as I was leaving the closing. Some may perceive it as harsh, but I see it as reasonable. She was weeping, stating she had heard about the sale, and pleading with me to give her a call back. I erased it before hearing the conclusion. I had a cottage to furnish and a garden to plant. And the weeks after selling the home were life-changing. Instead of burning myself alive to keep them warm for the first time in my life, I would let them figure things out. Rachel assisted me in moving into a lovely cottage just outside the city, complete with a wraparound porch and enough yard space for the garden I'd always dreamed of. The walls were painted in gentle, serene hues, nothing like the bright schemes my mother had always insisted were appropriate for a family home. My phone continued to ring often with messages from relatives, some of whom were upset and accused me of being selfish for selling the house before my parents had had time to work things out, while others attempted to make me feel bad by informing me that my mother sobbed herself to sleep each night. The only person who supported me was my Aunt Sarah, who told the others that they should feel guilty for their actions. Sarah informed me during Sunday brunch that she had bumped into your mother at the grocery store, telling everyone who would listen how ungrateful you are, but that most people now knew the truth. I grinned as I considered how the story had changed and that I was no longer the challenging daughter who refused to assist her brother. "That statement you had them sign has gone viral. Eric and Jessica had formally split, and he had returned to live with our parents. I was now the diligent nurse whose family had attempted to embezzle her funds. And my mom's attempts to play victim were failing. Though it didn't make me pleased to see them struggling. I felt a sense of justice when I occasionally drove past their rental house on my way to work. He was working as a sales clerk at an electronics store, which was his first real job in years, according to rumors I had heard. Additionally, things were improving at work. After I stopped letting my family consume all of my energy and resources, I was able to concentrate on my job and applied for and was promoted to charge nurse, which came with a substantial salary increase and better hours. My coworkers saw the change in me. I smiled more, defended myself in meetings, and refused to take on all the holiday shifts because other people had actual families to spend time with. One evening, while I was sitting on my porch planning my garden and watching the sunset, my mom's number appeared on my phone. I was calm instead of anxious when I hung up the phone. And when I listened to her message later, she asked if I could assist Eric with his rent money since he was having a really difficult time right now. I erased the message and returned to my gardening catalog, where I had placed orders for cucumbers, tomatoes, and my favorite, violets. The flower beds were ready. The soil was fertile, and the plants were ready to grow. I had weeded out the weeds of toxic relationships and was ready to cultivate something beautiful. So it felt like a metaphor for my own life. Rachel used to joke that I should publish a book called How to Stop Being a Doormat in 3 Easy Steps. Perhaps she was correct. It was as easy as sacrificing my life savings, confronting my family, and putting myself first. After selling the house, I had found a calm rhythm in my life. My garden was flourishing, with the first tomatoes ripening on the vine and violets blooming in tidy rows. I had made friends with my neighbors, joined a local book club, and even resumed dating after years of putting it off due to the demands of my family. My mom still made frequent attempts to get in touch, particularly when they needed money. But I always stayed within my limits. The family turmoil had not entirely vanished, but I had learned to handle it in a new way. No matter how many tears or guilt trips ensued, I would calmly answer, "I'm not in a position to help." That statement became my shield, shielding me from their manipulation. Eric's condition had become worse. After discovering that Eric had taken out credit cards in her name, leaving her with enormous debt, Jessica filed for divorce, and the baby, my nephew, lived mostly with her. When she came to me for guidance, I put her in touch with Marcus, who helped her go through the legal maze. Helping someone who truly deserved it felt good. One Sunday morning, as I was working in my garden, a familiar automobile rolled into my driveway, and my mom, who appeared older and more worn out than I recalled, got out. She had arrived without warning, most likely in an attempt to surprise me. "Your garden is lovely," she remarked quietly as she hovered near the fence. "You always did have a knack with plants." "Thank you," I said, still tending to my plants. "But you should call before you come here." I know. I wanted to let you know that your father and I are selling our house. And I miss you, honey." With a hopeful glance at me, she trailed off. "We can't afford it anymore. And Eric's expenses." I brushed the dirt off my knees and got to my feet. "I'm not giving you any money, Mom." "I wasn't asking for," she began, but then stopped herself. "That chapter is closed. You're doing so well, and we're your family, so maybe I was. However, can you hold me accountable for harboring hopes? Family doesn't take from family," I answered firmly. Family doesn't try to justify theft or forge signatures because one child deserves it more. "You made your decision, Mom," she cried as she went. "But I didn't feel bad about it. Now you're living with the consequences." Rather, I took pride in upholding my boundaries. I threw a little dinner party for Rachel, Sarah, and a few coworkers later that night. I came to a deep realization as we were sipping wine on my patio and seeing the fireflies dancing in my garden. This was the true definition of family. It had nothing to do with blood or duty. It was about respect, choice, and sincere concern for one another. With a knowing smile, Rachel raised her glass and toasted. "To boundaries," I added. "To growth," as I considered my blossoming garden and my even more thriving soul. 1 year has gone by since I confronted my family, and I'm still in awe of how much my life has changed. My cottage has turned into a haven, bringing me warmth and tranquility that I never experienced when my family was around. Last year, the garden yielded so many veggies that I began giving the excess to the nearby food bank. I often remember how my mother used to make fun of my gardening interest, saying it was a waste of time. It now makes me pleased and benefits other people as well. Without the continual burden of household emergencies, my job has thrived. My coworkers frequently remark on how much more confident I've gotten since I was just promoted to nurse supervisor. I no longer feel guilty about declining more shifts or using vacation days when I need to relax. I learned how to establish limits at home and applied that lesson to other situations. I'm somewhat of a local legend at the hospital, Rachel jokes. In addition to patient care, new nurses ask me for advice on how to defend oneself in trying circumstances. A young nurse thanked me last week for giving her the confidence to leave an abusive relationship. "I can stand up to one person if you can stand up to your entire family," she remarked. "Even if my parents and Eric still face difficulties, I am no longer responsible for them. I made my decisions, and they made theirs. Occasionally, letting others pay for their actions is the kindest thing you can do for yourself and them. Retaliation is no longer the focus. It's about self-respect and personal development. The money they took was only money, but the independence and self-worth I got from opposing them were invaluable." I discovered an old picture of my family at the housewarming celebration the other day. Shot right before things went wrong. Observing their arrogant expressions, I began to realize that I no longer feel furious. Instead, I'm thankful. I became stronger as a result of their treachery. And I now respect myself enough to leave poisonous relationships, especially when they are cloaked in familial ties. This spring, my garden is beginning to bloom once more. Sarah frequently comes to visit. And her youngsters like helping me plant fresh flowers. During our weekly coffee meetups, Rachel and I joke about how much I've changed from the person who used to take all of my family's demanding phone calls. Sometimes, even Jessica invites my nephew around. She claims that the garden also helps her heal. Although life isn't flawless, it is now truly mine. I have discovered that getting even isn't always the greatest form of retaliation. It's about improving. I would gladly do it all over again, since every flower that blossoms in my garden, every quiet evening on my porch, and every boundary I uphold serve as reminders that I made my own decision.